Morning, Pete, North Las Vegas. This is going to be part 3 of my wiring up a 71 Camaro using an American Auto Wire Classic Update Kit. And today I'm taking a look at wiring up the safety neutral circuit. And in 71 with a manual transmission, they used a clutch switch that acted as kind of a safety neutral. So you couldn't start the vehicle unless you pushed the clutch in. I'm not doing it that way. My transmission, which is a Tremec, has a safety neutral switch built into the transmission. So I'm going to use that as safety neutral and not worry about what the clutch does. And then if you had an automatic transmission, the switch was usually either on the column or if you had a floor shifter, the switch would be down by the floor shifter somewhere for safety neutral. But anyway, I kind of discovered a labeling problem, or what I feel is a labeling problem with the starting solenoid and safety neutral circuit with my kit, and we'll get into that. Okay, so on your ignition switch, you got your battery power coming into the switch, and that's this plug right here. So that's your battery power. And then on the other side of the switch, when you go into the start position, that switches your battery power to this purple wire for the starting circuit. And that's this wire right here, this purple wire. Now, here's the first issue, and hopefully this is all gonna make sense when I'm done. This purple wire here, this is the same wire that I have temporarily out of the way. I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but it says starter solenoid. So the first purple wire coming off the ignition switch, American Auto Wire, labeled solenoid. And that comes right off the ignition switch. Okay, so I know I'm kind of going over this. I'm starting and stopping the camera, so I'm kind of forgetting where I start and where I've left off. But anyway, this is the one that they labeled starter solenoid, which goes down to the ignition plug. This is the other purple wire, and they've labeled this neutral safety switch. Now this runs straight over to the fuse block and goes into the engine compartment. So in my opinion, they should have labeled this neutral safety, because that's the first stop from the ignition switch is to the neutral safety switch. And then this wire here on the other side of the neutral safety switch, which is this one, should have been labeled solenoid. And you can see that they labeled that neutral safety switch. Okay, so when I was checking things out with my meter, because I'm checking everything as I go along, I'm checking all the connections, making sure everything's working as I go along, doing continuity checks. So just to show you that on the inside of the car, they call this the neutral safety wire. I'll put my meter across what they call the solenoid wire on the firewall side. Okay, so here's the purple wire that comes out on the firewall that, in my opinion, is correctly labeled starter solenoid. Don't know if the camera's picking that up. So on this side, the engine compartment, it's labeled correctly. This is the same wire that comes through the bulkhead and into the car, and they decided to call it neutral safety switch. So this is why I was saying earlier in the video, I think they got their labeling mixed up. The wiring is correct, they just labeled it wrong. So anyway, we'll do a quick continuity check. So I've got one side of the meter hooked up to the neutral safety switch just to demonstrate that it's the same wire, even though they're, as soon as I get a good connection here. So it's the same wire, just depends on which side of the car you're on. All right, geez. Okay, so now, so like I said, it's the same wire, they just got the labeling mixed up. So now that I understand which wire is which, I can proceed. Okay, so now that we have the purple wires correctly identified, this is what I'm planning on doing for the safety neutral circuit on my car. And the reason I'm going to use this relay for the safety neutral contacts to handle the load. My understanding is that the Tremec safety neutral switch contacts on the transmission itself for my particular year and model were originally designed for a 5-volt computer input. They weren't really designed to handle a lot of load. So from my research, what I've read and what I've seen and watched videos and whatever, if you apply 12 volts through the Tremec safety neutral switch contacts and your solenoid power, over time the relay contacts will fail on the transmission. So everyone that everything I've looked into recommends that you put a relay in to handle the load. So one of the changes I made to this circuit was I put a manual safety neutral bypass switch in. And what happens is if the Tremec neutral safety switch does fail, or the relay fails, or wiring issues or whatever from this point out on the car, all I have to do is flip the manual safety neutral bypass switch and I can still get my start circuit down to the solenoid. So if all of this fails, I can still start the car. Okay, so here's the relay I'm planning on using. It's a 40 ampere. It's probably a little bit of overkill, but I thought I'd show just a mock-up of the wiring just to give you an idea. I'm probably going to put this out in the firewall, so some of this purple wiring that inside the car will have to be moved outside. I may have to drill a hole in the firewall or something to get some of the wiring out there. But anyway, the red and pink wire, which are these two on the relay, and that is 86 and 30. So 30 is your load, and you can see that the 30 wire is a little bit bigger gauge to handle more current, and this pink wire is the high side or the plus side of the coil. And the pink and the red are tied in with the safety neutral switch wiring, which is incorrectly labeled by American Auto Wire. And so that's the pink and that's the red, 86, 30, and going to the purple wire. So we'll just call it purple wire. Okay, now on the bottom side of the relay contacts, that's your orange wire. And this is the solenoid wiring, which is incorrectly labeled safety neutral by American Auto Wire. So that's the orange wire that comes in down here and goes over to the solenoid. And this will be number 85, which goes to the low side coil. And you'll get a ground through the Tremec on the other side of the switch. So there's a pigtail down on the transmission tail shaft. So one wire is going to go to a ground and the other wire on the pigtail will be connected to this. So like I said, this is just kind of a mock-up to show you what I'm doing and how I'm getting my relay in there, and the fact that I put in a safety neutral bypass switch. Okay, so under wiring instructions, neutral safety switch, 12 volt feed in to the neutral safety switch from the ignition switch. They labeled solenoid. The purple 12 volt feed out to the starter solenoid inside the car, they labeled safety neutral to the fuse block. And then when you get into the engine compartment on the other side of the fuse block, it becomes correctly labeled solenoid. Pete, North Las Vegas, over and out.